Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mitzvah Hashem today we will be learning Daf Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. We pick up on the very top line of Samach Aleph Amud Aleph in the middle of the words of the Ramah, V'yesh Oimrim. We're in Siman Reish Pei Beis in the middle of Sif Aleph. Our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanesunim Batzaru Bashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayom Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakayim Yerachem Aleihem V'yetzieh Mitzaru L'Rvacha Me'afelu L'Oira B'Shibur L'Geula Hashta B'Golo V'Zman Kariv V'Nemar Amen. Our learning should be a schus refuah shalema for Tzvi ben Leah Miriam, for Daniel ben Naomi. Our learning should also be a schus for Yisrael ben Rachel, Yonasan ben Michal, and Yoel ben Michal. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over them together with all of our brothers and sisters that find themselves in harm's way. Bechol Makayim Shehem. So, over here in Siman Reish Pei Beis Sif Aleph, the Mechaber told us a halacha that on Shabbos we take out a Sefer Torah and we have Kriyas HaTorah. By the Kriyas HaTorah of Shabbos Me'ikar Hadin, we need to call up 7 kruim. We need to call up 7 aliyas. The Mechaber told us, Im Rotza L'Haisif Maisif. If you want to add on to the 7 kruim, if you want to make Chaisafos, you have a Simcha in Shul, and you have to give the Zaydis and the Machatunim and everybody else, so you can make Chaisafos. Then the Ramah told us that on Yom Tov, you're also allowed to make Chaisafos. Now we pick up on the top line of Samach Aleph Amud Aleph, where the Ramah says, however, V'yesh Oimrim, there are those that say the b'Yom Tov ein lohisif. There are those that say that we should not make chaisafos on Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, we have to have 5 kruim. Now, on a typical Yom Tov, what we do is we have 5 kruim, and then after the 5 kruim, we call up a 6th for maftir. The same way on Shabbos, we have 7 kruim, and then we call up an 8th for maftir. But over here, the Ramah is telling us that we don't add on. This Yesh Oimrim says that we should not add on Haisafos to the 5 aliyas of Yom Tov, and the Ramah says V'chei nahagu b'medinais elu. That is the minig that we follow in our region, says the Ramah. Milavad b'simchas Torah, with the exception of Simchas Torah, which of course is a Yom Tov, shamaisifin harbe. But on Simchas Torah, we make a lot of Haisafos because we call up everybody. We allow everybody to have an aliyah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Vav, Ein Lohisif. So we have a Yesh Oimrim here who says that we should not make any Haisafos on Yom Tov. Now, before we go into the Mishnah Berurah, let's just pause for a second, because the Mishnah Berurah, interestingly enough, does not explain this. Why do we have this Yesh Oimrim that says that on Yom Tov you should not have Haisafos? So the reason for this is, let's remember why we have the number of kruim that we have. The way Chazal were Mesakin Kriyas HaTorah, on a typical Monday, Thursday, Shabbos afternoon Mincha, we call up 3 aliyas. It's brought down that those 3 aliyas are Keneged Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Now, on a day that's not a typical weekday, so let's say Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is a little bit of a Yom Tov. Or let's say Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed also, it's a little bit of a Yom Tov. So on those days, because they have a higher level of Kedusha than a regular Monday, Thursday, we add on an aliyah, and we have 4 aliyahs. Then we have Yom Tov proper. Yom Tov proper is a higher level of Kedusha than Rosh Chodesh, than Chol HaMoed. So on Yom Tov, we have 5 kruim. We have 5 aliyahs. Then we have Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a higher level of Kedusha than a typical Yom Tov. Therefore, on Yom Kippur, we have 6 kruim. We have 6 aliyahs. And then you have Shabbos. Shabbos is the highest level of Kedusha of all of them. So on Shabbos, we have 7 aliyahs. Now, on Shabbos, if you want to make Haisafos, so instead of 7 aliyahs, you can have 8, 9, 10, right? But Shabbos is the highest level of Kedusha. So by adding on aliyahs, you're not creating a problem where you're making it look like Shabbos is something that it is not. But on Yom Tov, where Yom Tov has 5 aliyahs, if you're going to make Haisafos, what are you going to do? You're going to add on 1 aliyah, and you're going to make 6 aliyahs on Yom Tov? Well, if you make 6 aliyahs on Yom Tov, then it looks like you're equating Yom Tov with Yom Kippur. But Yom Kippur is a higher level of Kedusha than a Yom Tov. If you add on another aliyah and you make it 7 aliyahs, now it looks like you're equating Yom Tov to Shabbos. Can't do that. Shabbos is 2 madregas over a typical Yom Tov. So therefore you have this Yesh Oimrim that says keep Yom Tov in its place, so to speak. 5 aliyahs and not more. Now, having said that, says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and vav, ukeshachal Yom Tov b'Shabbos. How about if you have Yom Tov that falls out on Shabbos? Well, once you have Yom Tov that falls out on Shabbos, it is Shabbos. Now you're going to have a minimum of 7 aliyahs. Now, l'kuli alma mutar l'haisaf al shiva. Now you could definitely add on haisafas, k'may b'shar Shabbos hashana, the same way you could add on haisafas and any other Shabbos. D'chi b'shvil sheni taisif by kedushas Yom Tov nigra mimenu amayla d'shar Shabbos. Does this Shabbos that happens to be a Yom Tov, the fact that it's also Yom Tov, does that make it less than any other Shabbos of the year where you're allowed to make Haisafas? No, certainly not. So when Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, you can definitely make Haisafas. However, Kishachal Yom HaKippurim b'Shabbos, let's say Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos. So Yom Kippur, regular Yom Kippur, gets 6 aliyahs. Now it fell out on Shabbos, now it's going to have 7 aliyahs. So you would think that, well, it's Shabbos. It's getting 7 aliyahs. If I want to add on, there's no problem with adding on. It is Shabbos. By adding on aliyahs, I'm not creating a problem. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Lechatchila, ach kishachal yom kippurim b'Shabbos, toiv lechatchila shaloi lahaisaf al shiva. Lechatchila, we should not make any haisafas over the 7 aliyahs. Why? A very interesting reason. Mishum sharoshe aparshiyos mechuvanim shemesaimim b'mili de kapara. Because on Yom Kippur, the way the aliyahs are broken up is very, very, very b'mechuvan. It's very intentional, the way the aliyahs are broken up. Because every single aliyah ends with a pasuk that has an allusion to the theme of kapara. I meant to bring a machzer with me. I wonder if this siddur, this is a Yom Tov siddur, I wonder if this siddur has the laning for Yom Kippur. It might. Let's see. No, it doesn't. It does not. Okay. Well, if you take a look at the Kriyas HaTorah of Yom Kippur, you'll see that each aliyah ends either with one of the karbonos, either it ends, let's say one of them ends ba'adoy uva'ad beisoy, that the kohen gets kapara for himself and for his family. So that's an allusion to kapara. There's another one that ends ba'adoy ba'ad kol kahal Yisrael. So that's kapara for Kans Klal Yisrael. There's an aliyah that ends with the karbonos, with the completion of the hakrava of one of the karbonos. So all of these are allusions to the theme of kapara. Now, if you're going to start making haisafos on Yom Kippur, you're going to have to break up the aliyahs in a different fashion. Once you start breaking up the aliyahs in a different fashion, you're going to lose that thematic quality. So we don't want to do that. Okay, Eis Katan Zayin. So we said, this Yesh Oimrim says that we don't make Haisafas on Yom Tov, Milavad b'Simchas Torah, with the exception of Simchas Torah, when we do make Haisafas, and we make a lot of Haisafas. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, why do we make Haisafas on Yom Kippur? The Kadesh Yiz on Simchas Torah, the Kadesh Yizke Kol Echad Likroi B'Torah Be'ez Siyam HaTorah. We want to give everybody an opportunity to join in and to have a part in the Siyam HaTorah, in the conclusion of laning Kol HaTorah Kula, the conclusion coming to the end of Azais HaBracha. We want everybody to be able to have an involvement in that, and therefore, Ukme Adina Karayv HaPaiskim. So on Simchas Torah, we follow the majority of Paiskim, Shematirin Lahisif B'Yom, the majority of Paiskim, Paskin like what the Ramah said in the beginning on Samach Amid Beis, that is, that you're allowed to make Haisafis on Yom Tov. So on Simchas Torah, where we want to give everybody the opportunity to join in the Siyam HaTorah, over there we go like Rav Paiskim, and we say that even on Yom Tov it is okay to make Haisafis. Okay, continuing now in the words of the Ramah. Second line down, in middle of the line. So the Ramah just said that we have this machlokes. We have one opinion that says no haisafas on Yom Tov. We have another, we have one opinion that says you could make haisafas on Yom Tov. That's the Day Rishona. Then we have the Eishayrim that says no haisafas on Yom Tov. Then the Ramah said that we're noyig, like the Day Shnia, that we don't make haisafas on Yom Tov. Having said that, now says the Ramah, realize, gam b'chol Yom Tov, every Yom Tov, ein hamaftirin miminyan hakruim. On every Yom Tov, at the end of laning, we call up a maftir, right? Every Yom Tov, we have a kriya, and we call up 5 aliyahs, and then we say Kaddish, and then after Kaddish, we call up a 6th aliyah for maftir. The maftir on Yom Tov lanes about the karbonis of that day. Now, that's a 6th aliyah. So the maftir is never counted in the 5, Kiddle Kaman, like we're going to say later. The Mishnah Berurah explains why the Ramah is saying this over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what the Ramah is trying to tell you over here is, every Yom Tov we call up a 6th aliyah for maftir, and that aliyah, that kaire, that oile, is going to lane about the chayvas hayom, the karbanos that are brought as an obligation on that day of Yom Tov. Umizeh mimela gam kein raya, from this halacha that we call up a 6th oile for maftir, that serves as a raya. That's a proof. The naktinon ledina kedei rishayna, that we must paskin like the day rishayna to be Yom Tov mutar lahaisef al minyan akruim. Obviously, you're allowed to add on. You're allowed to make haisafas on Yom Tov ukidol kaman. In other words, we had this machlokes whether or not you're allowed to make haisafas on Yom Tov. Says the Ramah, I'll show you that we paskin like the day Rishona, that you are allowed to make haisafas on Yom Tov. Because every Yom Tov, we in fact do make a haisafa. We don't only have 5 aliyahs on Yom Tov, we have 6. We have the 5 main aliyahs, and then we have a 6th one from after. So obviously you are allowed to call up haisafas on Yom Tov. Okay, moving along to Sif Bey's 3rd line down in the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Mechaber, we've established that you're allowed to make haisafas. Now, generally speaking, what do we do nowadays? We make haisafas in shul. What we do is we insert additional breaks into the sedra. Instead of just stopping by Sheni, Shlishi, Revi, Chamishi, Shishi, Shvi, we insert additional stops. Now, you have to make those stops at appropriate places, but we insert additional stops. But we don't repeat psukim. We don't call up an additional oila to repeat what the previous oila laned. That's typically not what we do. Says the Mechaber over here in Sif Beis, really, mutar likrois oilim harbe. You're allowed to make haisafas, so you're allowed to call up a lot of people to have aliyas. Afal pi shekarazeh, Mashekarazeh, even if the oila that you're calling up for a hisafa is going to lane over again and repeat what the previous oila laned. V'chayzer umevarech, and that oila is going to make his own brachas. Remember what we learned yesterday. Originally, the Mishnah Berurah told us the halacha was that the kohen came up and he made the opening bracha of Asher Banu of his aliyah, and he did not make a closing bracha of Asher Nasalonu Taras Emes. And the Levi didn't make any brachas. The Shlishi didn't make any brachas. The Revi didn't make any brachas. All the way until Shishi. The oila for Shishi would make the closing bracha of Asher Nasalonu Taras Emes. But that's not what we do. What we do is each oila makes his own set of brachas, both an opening bracha and a closing bracha. The chiddush over here that the Mechaber is telling me is, you're calling up an additional oila. You're making a hisafa. The Mechaber is telling me that that oila can actually repeat all of the same psukim that the first oila laned. So, for example, this week, Parshas Chayesara, you could call up a kain. The kain is going to lane the beginning of Chayesara until Sheni. Now imagine you make a hisafa. Well, that gets complicated because of Kain, Levi, and Yisrael. Let's do it in the middle of the parsha, Chamishi and Shishi. You're going to call up somebody from Kami for Chamishi. He's going to go ahead and he's going to lane Chamishi. Now you make a hisafa, and you call up another oila, and you tell the Baal Kaira, go ahead and lane Chamishi to Shishi again. So you're repeating psukim, and yet you're having the oila make 2 brachas over this repeat performance. So that's a chiddush because it kind of looks like a bracha she'eina tzricha. What? There's no addition to the kriya over here. So over what? Why are we making an additional 2 brachas when there's no additional laning? That's the chiddush that the Mechaber is telling you here. Mutter likra yisrael harbe. You're allowed to call up a lot of aliyahs. Alpha pisha karazeh masha karazeh. Even if the additional aliyah that you're calling up here is a repeat performance. He's laning over again what the previous oila laned. V'chayzer umavarich. And yet he's allowed to make his own brachas. And ein bekach klum. That's not a problem. Says the Mishnah Berurah's cut and test. Ein bekach klum. Umikam makayim. Nevertheless, ein a oila min a minyan. However, you need to have 7 aliyahs for the laning on Shabbos. An aliyah where he's only repeating what was already laned cannot count towards the 7 kruim. In order to have an aliyah that's choshev, that could be considered part of the 7 kruim, that aliyah has to have at least 2 psukim that were not previously laned. If it's 2, the reason it's a b'di'evid is because me'ikar adin, an aliyah has to have 3 additional psukim. It's only a b'di'evid to have only 2 additional psukim, and that's what's happening over here. You're only having 2 additional psukim, but b'di'evid, that could count to the count of 7 aliyahs. Okay, so that was the halacha that the Mechaber said. You could have plenty of aliyahs, and you could even have aliyahs where the Balkar is going to lane over again what was previously lane with no new addition, and the oila can make brachas on that, and it's not a problem of a bracha she'eina tzricha. Says the Ramah now, 4 lines down, Hagah, but v'yesh oisrim. There are those that answer this, and they say, if you're not laning additional psukim, you can't make an aliyah out of it. V'chei nagu b'medinais elu, and that's the way we're noig in our regions. Again, chutz mi b'simchas Torah, with the exception of Simchas Torah, shenagu laharbois pakruim, where we call up many aliyahs, v'nagu kisvara harishona, and we follow the svara rishona, the opinion of the Mechaber, that we could call up these aliyahs even though it's all a repeat. So what do we do factually on Simchas Torah, right? The Balkar gets up, he starts laning V'zais HaBracha, he lanes the first 5 aliyahs of V'zais HaBracha, and then they start calling up aliyah after aliyah after aliyah after aliyah, and they're just repeating the same 5 aliyahs at the beginning of V'zais HaBracha, and each one is making a bracha essentially on a repeat performance. On Simchas Torah, we allow this again because we want to give everybody the opportunity to join into the Siyam HaTorah. I remember there are those that say du'adin b'chasana. There are those that say that you could do this when there's a simcha in shul as well, like an afraf. You could also call up Paisafis without any additional kriya. Aval, however, minagenu, our minig is shaloi likra lazeh mashakara kvar echad af b'chasana. We don't do this. We don't have repeats, even in the case of a simcha. Lavad b'simchas Torah noig in Karama. He brings this down from the Pri Megadim. Okay, moving along to Sif Gimel, 5 lines down, middle of the line in the Shulchan Aruch, here on Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. The Mechaber brings down from a brisa in Masechtas Megillah. Hakoil olim leminyan shiva. Very interesting. Anybody could be called up for an aliyah and be counted towards the necessary 7 aliyahs, to the required 7 aliyahs on Shabbos. Hakoil olim leminyan shiva. Anybody. Afilu isha, even a woman, the katan, or a minor child, as long as sheyedea lemim mevarchin, as long as he's mature enough and he has enough knowledge that he understands when he makes a bracha that he's making a bracha to the Rabbeinu Shalom. In that case, he could be counted to the minyan shiva. Aval, however, having said this, and this is again directly from the brisa in Masechtas Megillah, Aval Amru, but Chazal said, Aval Amru Chachamim, but the Chazal said, Isha loy tikra b'tzibur, a woman should not be called up to lane from the Sefer Torah. Again, remember, back in the day, the one who had the aliyah actually did the laning. So the lashon of the mechaber is following the minig in the time of the Gemara, that you call up the aliyah, the oil is laning. That's why the mechaber says, "Avol chachamim isha loy tikra." A woman should not read; she shouldn't lane b'tzibur mipnei kvoid hatzibur. Why? Because of the kavod of the tzibur. Now this is actually very interesting. The mechaber is telling me, and again, this is not the mechaber alone. He's quoting a brisa in Masechtas Megillah. So these are the words of Tanoim, that me'ikar adin, really there's no reason why a woman cannot have an aliyah. A woman could have an aliyah, and she could count, her aliyah could count as one of the required 7 aliyahs. But we don't do it because of kavod hatzibur. Now, why isn't it kavod hatzibur? Does it somehow denigrate the tzibur if a woman has an aliyah? A lot of people look at this and they kind of look at it and say, well, women are second-class citizens. Like a woman should have an aliyah. It's not kavod hatzibur. It's not sneers. Now, it might be true that it's not sneers. I'm not telling you not otherwise. But that's not what the brisa says. The brisa says the reason you don't call up a woman for an aliyah is because of kavod hatzibur. Why isn't it kavod hatzibur? So I saw 2 things in the Rishonim. First is the Ritva. There's a very interesting Ritva. The Ritva looks at it, and the Ritva says like this. Okay, let's imagine we have the Sefer Torah out on the bima, and now the Gabbai, always a hard job being a Gabbai, right? You have to decide how to parcel out the aliyahs. And that puts the Gabbai in the very difficult position of having to prioritize, right? Who's, so to speak, bigger? Who gets shlishi? Who gets shvi? Who gets maftir? Right? Tough job that the Gabbai has. So the Gabbai is always not popular. So the Gabbai has to look around, and the Gabbai has to say, okay, that fellow is a tremendous Talmid Chacham. Everybody knows he's the Rosh Hakol. He's the Rav. He's the Rosh Hashiva. Okay, he's gonna get shlishi, right? Easy call. He's gonna get shlishi. This fellow, he's a gvir. He's a rich fellow. Gives a tremendous amount of tzedakah. He's always there for the tzibur. Okay, we're gonna give him a shishi. All right, fine. We figured that out. But you always have to be able to prioritize. So let's say it's a situation where you have men and women. Now, first of all, we have to understand right away, you must have 10 men, because laning is a mili shebekdusha, and for a mili shebekdusha, you need to have a minyan, and a woman certainly is not going to count towards the minyan, so you must have 10 men. So you have 10 men. Now you have a choice. I have to parcel out aliyahs. Should I give a man the aliyah? Should I give a woman the aliyah? Well, by an aliyah, we're talking about calling up a person to the Sefer Torah, and that person is going to recite, essentially, Birchas HaTorah. He's going to make the bracha of Asher Bacha Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'Nasan Lanu Es Torasai, Baruch Atah Hashem Noisein HaTorah. He's making a bracha over the Torah. Now, a man has a chiyuv of Talmud Torah. A woman does not have a chiyuv of Talmud Torah. So when it comes to an aliyah, right away, the primacy really should be given to a man. Not because the man is better than the woman, but because the man has a chiyuv of Talmud Torah. And since the man has a chiyuv of Talmud Torah, when it comes to being called up to the Sefer Torah, making a bracha of the Sefer Torah, he is going to come first. It's similar in a way to the fact that when we start laning, the first aliyah is going to go to a kohen. And following our psak and our minig, if you have a kohen who's an Amoritz, and you have a gadol be Yisrael, a tremendous Talmid Chacham who's a Yisrael, you're going to give the first aliyah to the kohen. You're not going to give it to the gadol. I mean, I grew up in Yeshiva Staten Island when Rav Moshe Zechet Tzaddik V'Kadosh L'Vracha came to Yeshiva. They gave him shlishi. They didn't give him kohen. They gave a kohen over him, right? Why? Because he's a kohen. That's why. He's a kohen. The Kiddashtoi, the first aliyah, goes to a kohen. In a way, it's the same thing. We're going to give an aliyah to the man before the woman because the man has a chiyuv of Talmud Torah and he's more shaykh to the bracha of Torah, to the Birchas HaTorah than the woman is. Now, if you go ahead and you give the aliyah to the woman over the man, in a sense, it looks like what you're saying is, this tzibur, there's nobody here in this tzibur that has shaykhis to Torah. Maybe they can't read, maybe they can't lane, maybe they don't understand, maybe they can't even repeat the words with the Balkaira. So we have a woman over here who can. So we're giving the aliyah to the woman. By the fact that you're giving the aliyah to the woman over the men, you're denigrating the tzibur. It's not kavod tzibur. You're putting the tzibur down because you're saying, even though the primacy really should have gone to the man, but nebuch in this tzibur we can't because there's nobody who's shaykh to the zach. So we had to give it to the woman. That's one reason. Another reason is because to give the aliyah to the woman, remember, there are 7 required aliyahs. And especially back in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, when the one who had the aliyah actually did the laning, so that person is being moitzi the tzibur. To have a woman be moitzi the tzibur, that's not kavod tzibur. Why? Because men, remember, we make brechas hashachar. A man makes a brechas hashachar and he says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shelo yasani isha. We're praising the Rebbeinu Shalom. I make this bracha every morning. Thank you, Rebbeinu Shalom, that you didn't make me a woman. Why? Why am I thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom that he didn't make me a woman? What would have been so bad if the Rebbeinu Shalom would have made me a woman? I would have to put on makeup. I would have to wear a sheitel. That's the problem. I'm thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom. Oh, Baruch Hashem, you didn't put me in a matzav where I have to wear a sheitel. I mean, what is the bracha? Shelo yasani isha. The answer is, I'm thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom Shelo yasani isha because as a man, I'm chayiv in more mitzvahs than a woman is. I'm chayiv in all of the mitzvahs. But a woman is potter from any mitzvah seishas man grama. So I have more kiyum, I have more mitzvahs to do. Numerically, I have more mitzvahs that I could be makayim than a woman does. And for that, I thank the Rebbeinu Shalom. The same way, I also say, Shelo yasani goy. Right? What's the bracha? Shelo yasani goy. There's a million reasons you might want to make a bracha, Shelo yasani goy. Look out in the street and look at them. They have no life. They have no purpose. They have no anything. I mean, nowadays, go look at what goes on, right? The hamnish ken leben. I don't know how they make it through the day. So that might be a reason why you'll say, make a bracha Shelo yasani goy. But what's brought down in halacha is you make a bracha Shelo yasani goy because they don't have mitzvahs. They only have sheva mitzvah b'nei noyach. So I'm thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom. Thank you, Rebbeinu Shalom, that you didn't make me a guy who only has sheva mitzvah b'nei noyach. Thank you that you made me a yid, and I have much more than that. Then you could have made me a yid, but you could have made me an isha. If you had made me an isha, I would be potter in mitzvah seishar azman grama. Thank you, Rebbeinu Shalom, for not making me an isha. Thank you, Rebbeinu Shalom, for not making me an eved. Not because I don't want to be an eved. I don't want to have to do the work of an eved. That's not what it is. If you would have made me an eved is like a woman. But an eved is a step down even from a woman because an eved, not just, they're also potter in mitzvah seishar azman grama, but they don't even have the same level of kedushas Yisrael. So that's another reason why we say Shelo yasani eved. But that's what's going on over here. So the fact that a woman who is a less mechuyev in mitzvahs than a man should get up and be moitzi the tzibur, that's again not kavod hatzibur. So again, just looking back at the words of the Mechaber here in Sif Gimel, Hakoil Olam Leminyan Shiva. Really, anybody could get an aliyah and be counted. His aliyah could be counted towards one of the 7 required aliyahs on Shabbos. Afilu Isha, even a woman, the Katan Sheyadei Lamim Avarchin, or a minor child who at least understands who he's making a bracha to. Aval Amru Chachamim. However, having said that, the Chazal said, Isha loy tikra b'tzibur. A woman should not lane for the tzibur or be called up for an aliyah for the tzibur. Mipnei kavod hatzibur. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Yud Aleph. The words of the Mechaber over here are Hakol Olim Leminyan Shiva. Now remember what we said earlier in the shir. The way Chazal were Masakid Kriyas HaTorah, on a regular weekday you have 3 aliyahs. On Chol Hamoed, Rosh Chodesh, you have 4 aliyahs. Yom Tov 5 aliyahs. Yom Kippur 6 aliyahs. Shabbos 7 aliyahs. The Mechaber wrote this halacha specifically by the 7 aliyahs of Shabbos. For the 7 aliyahs on Shabbos, even an isha or a katan could be called up. How about for the 5 required aliyahs of Yom Tov? How about for the 6 required aliyahs of Yom Kippur? How about the 4 required aliyahs of Rosh Hashanah, of Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed? How about the 3 of Monday and Thursday? Could you call up a woman for those? Says the Mishnah Berurah is katan Yud Aleph Leminyan Shiva Avaloy Leminyan Shloisha. But you cannot call up a woman and count her towards one of the 3 required aliyahs of a Monday, Thursday, or Shabbos afternoon mincha. And Uva Oila Shabbos Kasav, the Oila Shabbos writes, Tehu Adin Leminyan Arba Chamisha Shisha Sheyesh B'Rosh Chodesh V'Yom Tov V'Yom Kippurim Gam Kein Ein Oila. They can't be called up for one of those either. Now the Mishnah Berurah doesn't explain why. What's at play over here? The answer seems to be like this. Remember, the 3 aliyahs of Monday, Thursday, Shabbos afternoon, Mincha, that's kind of the Iker Hadin. The minimum amount of aliyahs that you can have by a laning is 3 Keneged Avram, Yitzchak, V'Yaakov. Now, we gave Rosh Chodesh and Chalamayid a Maila. Since they have an extra level of Kedusha, we give them a 4th aliyah. But that 4th aliyah is L'chvoid Hayom. That's an extra kibud for that day. It's not Me'ikar Adin. The 5 aliyahs of Yom Tov also, that's L'chvoid Hayom. The 6 for Yom Kippur, L'chvoid Hayom. The 7 of Shabbos, L'chvoid Hayom. Therefore, the Mishnah Berurah brings down the Magen Avram over here. The Magen Avram says, to the 7 of Shabbos, yes, you could add a woman, you could add a cotton, because those extra aliyahs are only L'chvoid Hayom. You're going to have the 3 basic that you're going to give to the men. You're not giving, we're going to have that in very soon in the Mishnah Berurah, you're not giving all the aliyahs to women. You're giving 1, 2, 3 to women, but you're still going to have 3 that are going to be men. So kind of the optional extra aliyahs that are l'chvoid hayom, those could be a women, but the 3 basic ones cannot. Now, if that would be true, then if we follow that logic, you would think that for the 4 aliyahs of Chalamayid, yeah, 1 of them should be available for a woman. The 5 of Yom Tov, 2 of them should be available for women. The 6 of Yom Kippur, 3 should be available. Right? That's what you would think. Yet the Mishnah Berurah brings down the Oila Shabbos, who says on Rosh Chodesh, on Chalamayid, on Yom Tov, on Yom Kippur, you also can't count women towards the required aliyahs. It's only on Shabbos that you can. Why not? So the reason for that seems to be for a totally different reason. Again, the 3 during the week you can't give to a woman because 3 is the minimum. For that, you need a minimum of 3 men. The reason you can't do it on Rosh Chodesh, Chalamayid, Yom Tov, or Yom Kippur is a totally different reason. And that is that on those days, everything that we lane is an absolutely required part of the laning. Because the laning on the Yom Tovim, the laning on Yom Kippur, the laning on Rosh Chodesh are all in Yana D'Yoma. They're all part of the topic of the Yom Tov, or of that day. And therefore, every aliyah is required. On Rosh Chodesh, the entire Rosh Chodesh laning is about Rosh Chodesh. It's all about the bringing of the carbon tamid and the extra karbanos that we bring for Rosh Chodesh. It's all required. Therefore, every aliyah has to belong to a man. Now, you'll turn to me and you'll say, well, Shabbos also, the whole aliyah is required. Yes, we have a minig that we lane the entire parsha on Shabbos. But that's a minig based on the fact that we want to be Messiah Kol HaTorah Kula over the year. It's not me'ikar adin, the needs of the kriya. Technically, we could have 7 aliyahs, each one could do 3 psukim, and we're mekayim the chiyuv of kriyas HaTorah. We don't have to finish the sedra, me'ikar adin. So that's why on Shabbos, we could get away with parceling out some aliyahs to women or ketanim, but not on these other days. Ois katan yud beis. The katan, you could also give an aliyah to a katan. Va'af, im ein sham kayin el a katan, really. Let's say you have no kayin. You only have a kayin who's a minor, el a katan. Kayin oisai, really, you could call him up for kayin. But, v'das Magen Avram, she'ein anu mechiyav l'kroisai, the Magen Avram says no. If the only kayin you have is a cotton, you're not mechuyev to give him the aliyah. The mitzvah say the v'kidashtoi. Why do we give the kayin the first aliyah? Because the pasuk says v'kidashtoi. We have to sanctify the kayin. B'chol mili de kedusha, the kayin always goes first. But the mitzvah say v'kidashtoi, says the Magen Avram, does not apply to a cotton. Lo nemer al kayin cotton. Da'ksiv ki es lechem elokecha hu makriv. Why is there a mitzvah of v'kidashtoi by a kayin? Because he does the avodah. The cotton lav bar avodahu, but a cotton can't do the avodah. The chein naigin biyamenu. That's the minig nowadays. She'ein b'beis hakneses kayin shehu ben shloishes reishana. If we don't have a kayin who's a gadol, kayin Yisrael b'mkayim kayin, we call up a Yisrael. Va'afilu yesham kain cotton, and this is true even if there's a minor kain. V'yoser bizeh noigin kayim. Not only that, but nowadays the minig is she'ain current cotton klal l'shom aliyah. Nowadays the minig is we don't call up a cotton for any aliyah. Afilu kvar nishla minyan akruim. Even for a isafa, even for a 9th, 10th, or 11th aliyah on Shabbos, we still don't call up a cotton. Ela l'maftir. It is brought down that they did call up ketanim for maftir. Kasav Amagad of Ram Hashem Esach Seifrim Sha'nashim women Alpha Pisha Ein Chayavais B'Talmud Torah. Even though a woman is not chayav B'Talmud Torah, Mikamakim Chayavais L'Shmaya Kriyas Sefer Ka'anashim. The Magad of Ram says that a woman has a chiv to hear Kriyas HaTorah. Ve'ein noig in lizar bazeh. However, we are not noig to be nizar in this. V'adara, but quite the opposite. Yesh b'kaimesh shenehagos hanashim lotzeis chutz be'es hakriya. There were places where there was a specific minig that the women should go out by Kriyas HaTorah. Why is that? I couldn't find it this morning, but what I remember seeing is, back in the day of the Mishnah, the minig was that by Kriyas HaTorah they would have a maturgaman. They would have somebody who would translate the laning into Aramaic, which was the language of the populace, so that the people should be able to understand what they were hearing. Nowadays, we don't have a maturgaman, but there was this idea that you wanted the men to be able to understand what they were hearing from Kriyas HaTorah. There was a concern that women who don't learn, so women aren't learning Mishnayos, they're not learning Gemara, they're not learning Shulchan Aruch, they're not learning Torah Shebaal Peh. If a woman is going to hear Kriyas HaTorah, she's going to hear Torah Shebiksav, and she's not going to have the benefit of learning Torah Shebaal Peh. Just from listening to the psukim, she can make big mistakes. We know that there are a lot of psukim that don't mean exactly what they say. For example, ha'chovel b'chaveroi, somebody hurts another person, ayin tachas ayin, okay? Reuven knocks out Shimon's eye, we're going to knock out Reuven's eye, right? So a simple reading of the Torah Shebiksav can definitely lead you astray in terrible ways. A woman is going to hear Torah Shebiksav by Kriyas HaTorah. She's not going to learn Torah Shebaal Peh. She'll come to make terrible mistakes. Therefore, the minig was that women went out by Kriyas HaTorah. But it's interesting, you see this Magen Avram who held that women were actually chayiv in Kriyas HaTorah. Ice cotton Yud Gimel, you could give an aliyah to a cotton so long as sheyedei alimim avarchin. He has to have the maturity and the knowledge to understand who he's making a bracha to. Will become akaim. Nevertheless, says the Mishnah Berurah, ein yachal liyos makre es ha'olam. While the Mechaber is telling me over here that a cotton could have an aliyah, but the cotton can't be the Baal Koreh who is being moitzi the tzibur in the Kriyas HaTorah. Dahainu, what do I mean? He can't be the makre. Dahainu shehu yikra b'kol ram b'sefer Torah, the Baal Koreh who's laning out loud, the ha'olim oimra macharav balachash, and the one who has the aliyah, is reading with the Baal Koreh quietly. The chol hatzibur yu yotzim yidei chevasan b'shmiya mimenu, so that the cotton should be the Baal Koreh who's being moitzi the whole tzibur in the Kriyas HaTorah. That a cotton can't do until he shows the signs of physical maturity that he has 2 pubic hairs. Umishahu ben shloishes reishana, once a boy is 13 years old, we could follow the chazaka by something like Kriyas HaTorah D'Rabbanan. We could follow the chazaka that a 13-year-old already has shtei cyrus. Nevertheless, if you don't have anybody else who could serve as a Baal Koreh, and if you don't use the cotton v'tispatel kriya lagamri, you're going to be mavatel Kriyas HaTorah. Mistapek ha-pri begadim, the pri begadim has a suffix. The efshir diyesh lahakol b'ofen zeh, maybe in such a case you could be makel. Afilu im lo hevi adayin shtei cyrus, even if you know for a fact that this cotton did not yet bring shtei cyrus. V'chem b'derech hachayim b'hilchos Kriyas HaTorah, makel gam kem b'shas hatchak. He was makel in a shas hatchak to allow a cotton to lane. Okay, I happen to know personally of a case where Rav Moshe, in a case that he considered to be a shasat chak, he allowed a cotton, a minor, to lane. That particular cotton was only a month short of his 13th birthday, but he allowed a cotton to lane on Shabbos and on Monday and Thursday as well. He allowed him to lane for the tzibur. Okay, going weiter. Says the Ramah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down near the end of the line, says the Ramah Hago. Ve'elu, when we talk about calling up a woman, calling up a katan, and the Mechaber said that they could count, their aliyah could count towards one of the 7 required aliyahs on Shabbos. Ve'elu dafka mitztarfin leminyan hakruim. But they could only be part of the number of aliyahs. They could combine with others. Mitztarfin means they could combine. But they cannot all be women or ktanim. And if you look at the Ois Katan Yodal in the Mishnah Berurah, Oirubam, they can't be roiv either. Okay, interesting. Continuing the Ramah, Vidin Eved Kenani Kedin Isha. The halacha of an Eved Kenani is the same halacha as a woman. Again, an Eved Kenani is chayiv in all mitzvahs except for mitzvahs Eishas Man Grama. Avalim Imay Yisrael, but if there's, I'm not sure what the Ramah means here. If there's an Eved Kenani whose mother was a Yisraelis, if his mother is Yisraelis, he's not an Eved Kenani. I'm a little puzzled here. Avalim Imay Yisrael, if his mother is a Yisraelis, mutter lalois, it's mutter to give him a regular aliyah. Says the Mishnah Berurah Tezvav, Imay Yisrael does have a Yisrael aliyah. He's a bona fide Yisrael. The chayiv b'chol mitzvahs. Continues the Ramah. The Aser Likrois Barosh Megula, somebody's called up for an aliyah, is not allowed to read from the Sefer Torah with his head uncovered. The Ein Iser Likrois Ama Oretz Nichbad Asher V'Gadol Adar Lifnei Talmid Chacham. There's no Iser involved, says the Ramah, to calling up an Amoritz, an honored Amoritz. Okay, so to speak, you have a person in the Tzibur who's an Amoritz, but he's an Adam Nichbad. Now, I assume this means he's a Shomer Torah mitzvahs, he's an Erlicha fellow, and he's an Adam Nichbad. He's always there for the Tzibur, he's a Gvir, he's a philanthropist. You could always go to him for the needs of the Tzibur. So he's an Amoritz. He doesn't know how to learn. He's an Amoritz, but he's an Adam Nichbad. He calls him also G'dayel Adar, one of the great people. Doesn't mean a Gadol Adar, like, the Talmid Chacham Gadol Adar. That's not what he means here. But he means he's one of the big people in the Dar. There's no Isser in calling up such a person lifnei Talmid Chacham, before a Talmid Chacham. K'en ze bezayin the Talmid Chacham. This is not considered a bezayin to the Talmid Chacham. Rak kavod l'Torah. It's giving kavod to the Torah shemiskabedes ba'anashim gedolim. By calling up honored people to the Sefer Torah, that's a way of giving kavod to the Sefer Torah. Now, imagine if the only ones who got aliyahs were the nirdika, if only the lowly people got called up to the Sefer Torah, so then it looks like the Sefer Torah, that's not an honor. That's not a kibbud, right? I heard many times from my Rebbe that Rebbe Feinstein that if when people fight in shul over aliyahs, which chas v'shalom should never happen and they should never do, but at least when they fight in shul over aliyahs, they're showing their children what they consider to be chashuv, right? Why, if an aliyah wasn't a chashuv azach, why would they fight over it, right? They would say, what do I care? What do I care who gets an aliyah? It's not a mechubadik thing to get an aliyah. But the fact that they fight over it shows that this is what they consider to be a kibbud. Now, why is that? Because chashuva people get kibbudim, right? So it's a kavod to the Torah to call up bakavadik people in order to get aliyahs. Finally, closing out the sif, the Ramah continues, umamzer, you have a mamzer, somebody who was born out of a forbidden relationship. Umamzer mutar lalis l'sefer Torah is allowed to get an aliyah. V'ayin le'el siman kuf lamed vav miseder hakruim. Earlier in Hilchos Kriyas HaTorah in siman kuf lamed vav, we went through in great detail, and there's a very famous biur halacha over there who gives you exactly the list of who comes first when it comes to aliyahs, who's a bigger chiyuv, who's a lesser chiyuv, etc., etc. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you're not allowed to lane from the Sefer Torah Barosh Megula, Hainu Afilu Hu Katan, even if it's a minor. What's the even over here? In other words, you might say he's a cotton. The cotton doesn't always have the yarmulke on his head. Even a cotton is not allowed to come up to the Sefer Torah, lane from the Sefer Torah Barosh Megula. V'chein cotton shu pecheach. If you have a child, the Hainu Shabbat of Kruim, somebody who has ripped clothing, who's Rayosav, Kseifav, Megulin, or he's wearing a tank top and his forearms and his shoulders are uncovered, Asur L'Kreis El Torah, you're not allowed to call him up to the Sefer Torah. That would be a bezayin to the Sefer Torah. Let's go a little bit weiter. Says the Mechaber Sif Dalet, bottom line. Noihagim Likroi Shiva. The minig is to call up 7 aliyahs, V'ligmari mayam aparsha, finish laning the sedra with 7 aliyas. V'oimer kaddish, so after the 7 required aliyas and the completion of the sedra, you say chatzi kaddish. V'choyzer v'koirei im hamafter mashakara shvi. Then after kaddish you call up the mafter, and the mafter is going to repeat part of the 7th aliyah that was laned during the shvi. Okay, let's just see a little of the Mishnah Berurah over here. Turning back to Samach Aleph Amud Aleph, Mishnah Berurah is cut Yudches Noihagim. Mashanagu limkar shishi b'ftei atzmai. Back in the day, they would sell the aliyas, but they would sell the aliyas as a group, like they do now in some shuls, right? Fin of Dalaf Hada Mitzvahs. They sell all the aliyas as all the kibudim as one group. But shishi, they would sell on its own. Mashanagu limkar shishi b'ftei atzmai. This that they sell shishi on its own, which is showing that shishi is a big kibbud. Yesh k'tzas smach me'azar shlach lecha. You could see this in the Zohar in Parsha Shlach, that shishi is considered very, very choshev. Va'achroin, and so to achroin. Now this doesn't mean what we call achroin. Over here, achroin means shvi, the last aliyah. So that's the aliyah where you're going to finish the sedra. Va'achroin moichem b'ftei atzmai, and also shvi was sold on its own. The achroin chaviv, because the last aliyah is very beloved. Shemesayim boy, because that's the aliyah that completes the seder, the sedra, and there's a special chashivas to that, brought down from the Pri Megadim. Nevertheless, having spoken about the chashivas of different aliyahs, chas v'chalila lehiskoiteit ba'avur zeh. Chas v'chalila that there should be fights over the aliyahs. Shekol oisiyais HaTorah hem kulam kedoshim u'tahirim. Every letter of the Torah is kaddish v'tar. So this one bigger than that one, bigger than that one. They're all words of the Torah. Kediksiv imrais Hashem amarais tahirais. Okay, we'll pause over here. We'll continue next time with Mishnah Berurah. Ice cut and your test. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rasham should send Yeshua's refuahs parnaset sheduchim to those in need. We should be zeichet to see the BS Gal Tzedek. B'mher of Yameinu Amen. Be well.